Good evening, Western Standard viewers, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics show of the Western Standard. It is Thursday, March the 12th. President Trump says it's almost all over in Iran. The next day, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says they've just had their most intense day of attacks. Whatever is going on in Iran, there can't be much left worth blowing up. But maybe this wasn't just about Iran. With us tonight is Casey Babb. He is the director of the Promised Land Project with the Macdonald Laurier Institute in Ottawa, a fellow with the Royal United Services Institution in London as well, and a widely consulted expert on security at home and abroad. Welcome to the show, Dr. Babb.
No, thanks very much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, what do you make of it? When President Trump says the U.S. is nearly done in Iran, and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says the next day that they've just had their most intensive day of attacks, the default reaction from people who don't like Trump is that confusion reigns. On the other hand, the U.S. has just essentially disarmed Iran, sunk its navy, destroyed its air force, blown up most of its missile launchers, eliminated the senior cadre of leadership. So what do you think was the goal, and has Trump achieved it?
Well, my sense is that statement in terms of the war being possibly near the finish line was possibly the president's way of trying to stabilize the markets to a certain extent, and I believe that may have worked at least temporarily. However, if we zoom out a little bit and we ask ourselves, well, what's been achieved thus far? What does Jerusalem, what does DC, what do they want to achieve over the long term? And what does victory look like at the end of this war? I think you're actually probably quite a ways off in terms of this being over anytime soon. My sense is that this is going to take many, many weeks, probably months. And the goalposts of victory could move incrementally as time goes by and as certain geopolitical and military realities become clearer. You mentioned massive hits to the regime's military forces, their navy, their ballistic missile program, their abilities to launch drones, and so on and so forth. That's all great. But does that do a lot for the people of Iran over the long term who want to be liberated from the Islamic Republic? Probably not. Has it done anything in terms of getting the actual enriched uranium out of Iran? Not yet. Are we on the brink of a regime change? It doesn't seem so. So, as I said, the goalposts could move. The metric of success could change. But right now, it still feels like there's a lot of work to do. And I think this is going to drag out for quite a while.
Now, in the Straits of Hormuz, we have a number of ships stranded. The Iranians have still got some way of controlling that waterway. The fact that a number of small mine layers were blown up yesterday suggests that there may be others, because I don't think we knew about them earlier in the week. Also, drones. How many drones do you need to retain to still pose a credible threat? How is that? What are your predictions for that in the next week?
Well, my sense is that the Iranians, the regime, that they're going to really start ticking a lot of people off by these attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. That message has been clear, that they are not to do that, and that they are not to disrupt the flow of energy out of that part of the world. And that's exactly what they're doing. And I think that there are a lot of people who are going to become increasingly irritated with this unless the regime stops. And this is an administration that you don't want to irritate, because as they've said, they'll find you and they'll kill you. And the Americans are now signaling that there could be some strikes in those port areas of Iran, and that's what I would expect to see soon. And I think we're going to continue to see very, very heavy airstrikes. And I should also note that the Israelis have mentioned at the highest levels that there could be something quite spectacular around the corner. We don't know what that is, what that looks like. But I'll say this: the beeper operation that is now quite well known, that's not the end of it. The Israelis, the Americans, they have other tricks up their sleeve. And when you start disrupting global energy markets and things of that nature, you might nudge those parties towards using, other tools in their toolkit, so to speak.
All right. Well, we'll watch the scanners for that. In Israel, I presume people are sleeping a little easier knowing that the Iranian regime has been set back so far in its weapons program. What could you speculate on what this means in Beijing? The Chinese got a lot of their oil from Iran. I think it was something like 13% of their supply. Right now, they're not getting that. They've also just lost Venezuela. So that's got to hurt. Is this actually more about China than it is about Iran?
That's a great question, and I think you're really onto something there that people need to be paying closer attention to, and that, of course, is the China angle. But for now, Nigel, I would say that the China element is more of a downstream situation that people should probably park for now, because there's just so much to do and so much that could happen between Iran, the U.S., Israel, and other parties in the region, Gulf states. Obviously, you mentioned China's imports and what this is doing for them. China's watching this, and this is obviously sending a number of signals to Beijing and to the Communist Party there. But it's also not all bad for China. There could be opportunity here. There could be other states in the region or across the world that are saying, well, look at the U.S., look at Israel, look at some of these Gulf states that are tied up in this mess. Governments could potentially pivot towards Beijing, and we're seeing some of this, right? So that anti-American sentiment could be sort of accelerated by this war, which could actually be to the benefit of China and other unsavory regimes. So it's a lot to unpack. I would say, yeah, keep an eye on the China element here. But right now, there's just so much that needs to be done in Iran. And I like I said earlier, I think Jerusalem and DC are so far away from achieving what could be, long-term success, that the priority should be watching what they do right now, as opposed to following Beijing.
Okay, well, I just asked the question because China has bailed out Iran before. In fact, they have made them a very significant player in the region. They probably think they were before, but after China had armed them and developed an ongoing relationship with them, even helping them get back on their feet after the Israelis attacked in, 2025 and 2024, memory fails me, but the Israelis had a go at the Iranians
Yeah, it was
a few years ago. Okay, I think the Chinese played quite a large part in putting Iran back on its feet. Now, of course, they have had this, and you could make the argument that in pushing back on Iran, which of course was used to destabilize the whole area, the United States has actually dealt China a blow. I don't know what you think of the Hudson's Institute. They're certainly a conservative institution, and they go all the way back to Herman Kahn, who I had to study when I was at university. So I have to give them some credibility. And they make the point that described as an extraordinary assault on the world's leading state sponsor of terror, which is true, but it misses this critical dimension. For years, Beijing has spent billions of dollars building Iran into a structural asset. By striking Iran directly, the Trump administration is dismantling, whether by design or by consequence, a pillar of China's regional architecture. And of course, they dismantled some more when they lifted Maduro out of Venezuela. Grand strategy, playing risk, but for real. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about that, and I think, folks at Hudson, they know what they're talking about, and I would agree with all of that. Look, over the last, number of years, the last couple of decades, there's really been a decoupling of, global powers, global economies, and allies, those that are with America and those that are with China or Russia, and we're seeing these sort of, these cliques, um proliferate and these siloed dynamics take hold. And China and Iran are very much aligned and they've supported each other. China, as you noted, has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in Iran. They have really enabled Iran to build out that oppressive infrastructure that they've used so savagely and barbarically to subjugate the great people of Iran, and to control freedom of movement, freedom of thought, access to information, and surveillance. And so yeah, this is the U.S. They're going in there and they're hitting the Iranian regime, but of course, yeah, they are sending a message to Beijing. They're punching Beijing right in the mouth, and they're saying, "Look, you've wasted hundreds of millions of dollars in this part of the world. Um, we're not going to allow this to go on for much longer, and you don't have this isn't your sandbox to play in and make sort of a vassal state for Beijing." So yeah, Nigel, there's no doubt about it that this sends a message to China and that it weakens their grip in a country that they've probably seen as a very important part of their chessboard for years now. But like I said, I think it's still too early to tell what this will mean for China or Iran over the long term. I mean, if indeed in a few weeks or a few months this war sort of fizzles off or comes to some sort of strange conclusion, and Khamenei's son is all of a sudden the new hardline supreme leader, and he's in power, and the regime is back up and operating, and you still have enriched uranium on the ground, and the regime would now be more emboldened than ever. They would take this as a victory, as a almost a holy victory in many ways, a divine victory. That's not going to hurt Beijing at all. If anything, it's going to open up greater opportunities for China. So I think China could be hurt through this, yes, of course, and they're probably looking at the situation now going, well, this isn't great for us, but over the long term, it might not be as significant as we think right now.
Well, they certainly have a reputation for taking the long-term view of things. In the short term, does this make a Chinese intervention in Taiwan more or less likely?
I don't think it makes it more likely or less likely. I think China is probably in a bit of a holding pattern right now. They probably want to see what happens, like everybody else, over the coming weeks and months. Although, the case could be made, and I'm sure there are analysts out there saying this, that with America so heavily tied up in Iran, this could be an opportune time to go in and achieve what they've said that they wanted to do for many, many decades now in Taiwan, because the Americans are distracted and they have infrastructure and assets that are in theater right now that would be difficult for them to pull out and to pivot. So, that argument could be made as well. But I don't think Beijing wants to do that. And they're seeing what's happening in Iran. The regime is getting absolutely annihilated. The Chinese don't want that. I think that they're probably seeing some of these historic operations, these precision strikes, these really devastating blows to Iran's military infrastructure, as strong as China is, no leader in their right mind is going to watch these videos and look at these developments and think, yeah, I could go up against that. America has the strongest military by far in the history of the world. And China's probably taking notes right now. And if anything, I would imagine it's probably making them pause a little bit more than anything else.
Okay, let's talk about Israel and the Middle East. How does Israel exploit this situation to their own benefit? And what does success look like for them?
Yeah, it's really tough, Nigel. I think in the early days of this campaign, there was real shock and awe. There was some, sense of jubilation and excitement, not just in Israel, but beyond. I mean, you're seeing key leaders just get removed, like immediately. You're seeing key military installations being turned into dust. You're seeing essentially whole elements of their military, such as their navy, which you've talked about, just gone in the blink of an eye. Um, and so those early days, a lot of people, myself included, were watching this going, wow, I mean, this is really unfolding more dramatically and faster than we expected. Victory is around the corner. Victory is probably a regime change. Victory is probably a no ballistic missile program any longer. Victory is probably a nuclear program that is not just punted down the road, but that's been vaporized. And I think a lot of those illusions have now disappeared because it's coming into clearer focus now that to actually do a lot of that, it's going to require, you can't just bomb your way into all of those objectives or into all of those successes. You can bomb your way very, very far and very close to achieving those things. Don't get me wrong. People often underestimate the power of military campaigns. Don't do that. If you're listening to this, I wouldn't want this to be taken the wrong way. Trust me, the U.S. military and the Israeli military can do a lot just by carrying out devastating airstrikes. But, if you look at the enriched uranium that's buried under mountains of concrete and steel and rubble, well, how do you get that out of there? That's not just a simple task. Do you arm militias on the ground there? What's happening there? Again, that's just not going to be done overnight. How do you replace a regime? Well, you can't really. That has to sort of come from within. Are the people in a position now to do that? These are things that we don't know. And so I think victory not only is victory, regardless of what that looks like, probably quite a ways off. I think victory really looks different to a lot of people. I would imagine if you're in Israel, and I know some of my colleagues at the Institute for National Security Studies would echo this. This is a lot to go through. The Israelis have gone through a lot, and this didn't start 14 days ago. It started like closer to 3 years ago, with October 7th. And so you have a population that's exhausted. You have a population that's traumatized. And for them, at the end of all of this, when it's all said and done, and the sirens stop wailing, is it going to be enough when analysts stand up there and go, yeah, we've bought ourselves 3 years? I don't think so. I think they want something a heck of a lot more substantive than that. So I think victory to them looks like a complete removal of the nuclear program, an end to the ballistic threat, and maybe a regime change. And when you ask the Iranian diaspora, what does victory look like to you? It doesn't look like the supreme leader being eliminated and his son just replacing him and becoming a hardline, tyrannical, religious fanatic for the next 50 years. That's not what they want. So victory to them, I think, is a long way off as well. So Nigel, this has to go on, I think, like I said, for weeks and months. And some more things need to be put in motion. One thing that I would tell people to keep an eye on is if there are reports of pretty large scale defections, that would be a good sign. that maybe the regime is weaker than it appears to be right now. So those are the sorts of things that you might wanna watch for. Internal clashes would be another one. So there's a lot of dynamics here at play, but it's not a simple we went in, bombed them, and we won sort of situation.
Well, I guess we should leave it there. There is no certainty, but something has certainly changed, and I have to think that the ability of Tehran to place markers around the region, fund Hezbollah, fund Hamas, fund the Houthis, it's going to take I use 3 years. It's going to take some time before, if ever, they can do that again. They're out of ammo. So should we? We'll take that as a good sign and hope for the best, I guess. Any last words on it before we go?
Well, I would just say this, right now, of course, and for obvious reasons, people are focused on the military situation right now, the strikes, what assets are being removed, what military leaders are being removed from the battlefield. And that's all fine. And I understand that. But the Iranian people right now are in a terrible situation. Both inside Iran, there's a lot of anguish and anxiety and turmoil, and outside Iran too. So if you're watching this and you're part of the Iranian community, please know that a lot of us are with you, and we support you. And while all eyes seem to be on the military campaign, there are a lot of us, myself included, who are paying attention to your situation in particular. And I just hope that there are brighter days for the great people of Iran around the corner.
And I think we all echo that aspiration. Good people. Thank you, Dr. Bebb. For the Western Standard, I'm Nigel Hannaford.